Hello and welcome back to Factorio Demystified. This will be a somewhat longer episode than usual. We're going to handle early game combat attacking and do it in as comprehensive a way as I can. Now, by early game, I mean your evolution is less than 20%, so you're not getting any of the advanced tiers of enemies coming your way, and you do not yet have access to oil, so you have somewhat limited options for building up your military. Now, if you went bigger on the Jumpstart Factory than I did and actually went with the black military science, it wouldn't actually change that much. The only item that you can get that we don't have access to is going to be the Defender here, Combat Robot number 1. Now, there are other items that we could research, but we can't produce them without oil, such as perhaps rockets or landmines or flamethrowers or various other assorted sundries. From the beginning of the game, our very first research we did was gun turrets, and we had the firearm magazines, so we've been using those as we have gone forward. But now we have unlocked some new possibilities, and we have more that's coming. So the tech progression here that I'm going to want to follow is military. And this one you can see it leads to a whole bunch of items. It's very cheap. Early on, you can grab it right away. And it has the submachine gun, and that has the same performance stats as the turret does. So it's basically like walking around with a turret shooting instead of the much weaker pistol. Then there's the shotgun, good against hardened targets. It has slightly more damage output, but the range is lower. And it's also going to be one that it's a scatter shot. So the further away your target is, the worse it's going to do for you. We like to keep a good range between us and the enemy. So the shotgun is not used nearly as much as the submachine is typically. Then we move up to heavy armor. And this requires quite a bit of resources. You can see the copper and the steel, but it's also a significant upgrade. The light armor was 3 and 20% on the physical, and we're up to 6 and 30%. So this is one we definitely want to grab quickly. And then we have military 2. And this gives us grenades. Our first explosive device. These are going to be quite important. Gives us another use for coal. Not too much of a price there. But you can see the crafting time is pretty significant. And then we get an upgrade on our magazines as well. Now, from a pure resource point of view, this doesn't seem like that efficient of a deal, because it's actually using a little over 3 times the resources that a regular firearm magazine is, and only 60% more damage, moving up from 5 to 8. But when it comes to combat, you really don't want to scrimp. You want to say, okay, I'm going to spend whatever it takes to have the most combat effectiveness that I can possibly have. So that's what I have done off screen in getting the research ready. And there are more that we can do. We are just finishing up on projectile damage. We get projectile damage or weapon shooting speed. Both of these are going to increase the DPS by 10%. You can see damage plus 10%. Or shooting speed plus 10%. But of course, the damage is not going to use more resources to give me that additional damage. So I want to have that first instead of the shooting speed. We're going to want to get stronger explosive as well. And there's another level above these in the projectile damage and the shooting speed that we can also get. And then the final item that I'm really going to want, this is sort of the peak, in my opinion, of early game combat, is the automobile. Or just plainly labeled car. Now, it says that this is simply an engine-powered vehicle that's used for transportation, but it also can fight as well. Now, it's pretty expensive on the research side, so we are going to get this towards the end. It has the engine here. That's 100 of each of those, and then 200 of each of the science required for logistics too. This gives us faster transport belts, the second tier of those, and our splitters and all of that. But that's not actually why we're getting it. We're just getting it because it's required for our car. Let's take a look at some of our new capabilities here and try out a couple of different attack options and strategies. So we're going to have our heavy armor. We have submachine gun, shotgun. We can switch between those two weapons with tab. Of course, we've gotten rid of our pistol. It's useless to us now. We have our regular firearm magazines, not using the piercing ones. I didn't want to wait for them. I think doing this as a demo on low tech is useful. But also, I'm using the steel for my solar panels, so I didn't want to interrupt that either. We have our grenades, and this is going to be the key element to this. Range of 15, throwing speed of 2, 35 explosion damage. You can see the area of effect. And instead of a drive-by shooting, this is going to be a run-by grenading. But first of all, we want to clear out any biters. This circle here is the area I can throw my grenades in. I don't have a lot of them, but I should have enough. And of course, again, we can't move very fast while we're firing. But that does not apply. Oh boy, here comes what I think is an attack headed for our factory. So yeah, we can see a little bit of what the grenade can do there. But also, let's just clear all of them out. So we want to use the grenade on the worms is the idea. But we can't be in their firing range for very long at all. They will slow us down and cause all kinds of problems. So we have to get in, get out. Okay, now we're out of their range. We're going to use a fish. And we're going to shoot down anything that is getting in our way. And we're going to go back in and try to finish them off. And grenades work very well at killing trees as well. That's in fact what a lot of players actually think they're good for. Now that we've done that though, we might want to use our shotgun. Might. But the shotgun is going to be more effective. It's going to take down the spawners more quickly. So if we switch back and forth. Well, let's get a little closer. There we go. We can switch back. Maybe knock out a few biters. Switch back to the shotgun. You can see each shot takes a nice chunk. Let's get here a little bit closer to see it better. Out of the spawners. There we go. Let's get rid of all of you. Knock out the next spawner. And so on. There we go. And we've only got one more to go now. So we're feeling pretty good about ourselves. Make sure we're nice and close. There's another base nearby that's sending biters our way. That's not fun either. Just going to heal up a bit. And there we go. So you are down. Let's see what happened to our evolution from killing 3 spawners, and that's it. Hey, look at that. Get a little bit more clearer view, but 7% of our evolution from killing those 3 spawners, more than 2% each. Yep, they're really costly when it comes to that. The other method that's typically used at this stage is known as turret creep, and it's much more common. It will place a lot of the risk, if we do it correctly, on the turrets themselves and not so much on us as the player, so it's safer. A little bit slower, a little bit more fiddly, but it will allow us to take on somewhat larger bases than simply fighting on foot will, and with a lot more firepower eventually. So we're going to gradually move our turrets forward. I want to go about 1/3 to 1/2 of the turret's range, and then add more, and drop in more ammunition into them. And so, hence the name turret creep, we are just creeping gradually towards the enemy base. And here we go. We have some fun friends coming in. We'll get rid of the ones in the back. And advance. Let's go ahead and repair this one. And we'll put down a 3rd turret with it. And then we will push on further in. Okay, now we're getting somewhat more regular shots. That tells me we're getting close because we're starting to form what I would call a drain line. The spawners are putting out biters and they're continually heading towards our turrets. But I want to get a little bit closer. And we actually got just close enough to take out a spawner. I wasn't fully intending to get quite that close. It's a very thin line between, because you see these are activated and irritated, the worms are, but they're not quite firing at us. And so now we want to see, and again, this is a part where I don't have the best arcade skills. Many of you will be more skilled at that part than I am, but we're looking at the idea here. We don't want to put our turrets, I want to rush forward and kill the rest of this. But I don't want to put them, like, to the north or the west, because they're going to shoot at whatever's closest to them. I don't want that to be the spawners. I want to go after the worms. They're always that worst target, most dangerous foe. So I need to place them on this side. I want the turrets to be within range of these worms, but far enough away that I can reasonably safely fill them with ammunition. So, if we run this way, quickly scatter a bunch of them out there. And the idea here is that we are going to have these filled up with ammunition, and then they're going to do the fighting for us, as they just did. Worms are dead, and all the spawners but one are dead, and then I can kill that any way I want. I can just move forward additional turrets, I can go fire at it myself, whatever is going to work. Now, if we back off here and just imagine this was a larger base, though. We had a couple worms here, maybe we had 3 or 4, and then there's some spawners here, and then there's some more worms over this way. So at a certain point, using this method, anywhere you place the turrets to fire at one group of worms, they'll take them out, but the group over there, or wherever else it is going to lob its acid at you and start taking out your turrets. And at that point, this becomes a very costly method, because what you'll have is a lot of turrets and ammunition going down, and you'll be losing a lot. But for small to, I would say, low moderate sized bases, where maybe you've got 5 or 6 spawners, 5 or 6 worms, or less than that, this can really be a very effective method, and is the most common one used at this stage of events. So we've just taken out our first enemy base. Now what? Well, we could use some different hybrid type of options in terms of our strategy as well. For example, you could use the running in and grenading on foot option, but have a few turrets set up as a fallback point. But if we take a look at these enemy bases down here, they're now actually going to have more pollution reach them, because the pollution that was being absorbed by the base we just eliminated is not going to be absorbed. It's got to move out into various trees or other tiles or other enemies or wherever it's going to go. We need to continue this process. But our main goal is going to be to first focus on the radar. Continue to get our radar network up and out to the edge of the pollution cloud at least. And then we're going to want to be killing enemies. In between, we're going to be running back and forth to our base, putting up additional solar panels as they become available. We resupply, we go back out. So that's sort of our gameplay loop here as we continue to push out and handle all of these smallish bases that we run into. A little over an hour forward, and we now have 16 radar stations up and running. Almost our entire perimeter clear around the pollution cloud, except for this bit of the water over here, it doesn't matter. And this thorny situation. We've looked at these before, but probably about a dozen spawners there total. Fair amount of worms involved as well. And since the two bases are close together, this is definitely the largest concentration anywhere near us. Once we get by this, though, it should get a lot easier for us. So that's the positive side. Taking down most of our perimeter turrets. This area hasn't seen any action at all recently. Over here, we have added the piercing round magazines, as this is where you can see the body's still there. This is where, by far, pretty much all the fighting actually now is happening, as they're the only bases sending attacks at us anymore, so we don't only have to care about the northwest there. Now we are building our piercing round magazines over here. You can see I've got another chest set up with just extra regular magazines to be loaded in there gradually, and recycle those for use in these. And anytime you can recycle equipment for a better use, always a good idea. Our research, exactly which upgrades you want to get when as you go through this military, really depends a lot on what your combat environment is, how quickly you get out there with your radars, how quickly do you want to take the fight to larger bases. But we have almost all of them in place. Only the second weapon shooting speed is left on our military upgrade path, and we have our car. So it's time to learn how to drive. Producing this car actually was a bit interesting, because I had to put up a temporary assembler to produce the engines. You can't handcraft engines, but you can handcraft the car that the engines are used to produce. So we just need to place this down wherever we wish, and voila, we have our first vehicle. Big milestone in the game. If we see that it needs fuel, we'll click on this. Big space here for extra storage. I could just throw a bunch of stuff in here if I wanted to, but we're going to make sure we give it fuel. Go with coal for now. Let's give it the best ammunition that we have as well. Those piercing rounds, I don't have enough of them to go around yet, so I'm just bringing along some regular rounds for myself as backup. And then to get in the car and actually drive it, we hit enter. Enter to get back out again, but it stays this lovely tan color instead of the original silver. So to drive this around is WASD, just like it is to run around the map, but it's a little bit more complicated. If we hit S to start moving backwards, and then W to brake, W also moves the other direction, but it won't actually do that. I'm holding it down now. It won't actually move that way until I release, and then press it again. Same thing, braking, still braking, release, press it again, I can go back the other direction. And that's just how the game determines, are you trying to brake to a stop? It doesn't let you brake so hard that you accidentally go back the other direction. But since the brake and reverse buttons are the same, it's a little bit finicky to get used to driving this. Then we have A and D for turning. If we get moving, turn this way, turn back the other way, etc. All of that's going to work well for us. This is a nimble and quick vehicle that is not particularly durable. So we don't want to just, slide into our power poles. Even a low speed encounter will cause some damage, both to ourselves and the power poles. If we run into trees at a fast enough speed, the wimpier ones are not actually going to stop us, but they will slow us down. And if you run into rocks, you're stopping in this thing. And that's a very bad thing. If you're doing that in combat, you're going to get swarmed over and you're going to get killed. So the terrain really dictates a lot whether this is even a good option for combat. Because if there's a lot of trees and rocks in the area, you want to avoid it or be extremely careful when you do it. Now we have, there's an attack that appears to be coming. Yep, they're just starting now, actually. Let's just stay out of their way and make sure we don't become the target. Okay, maybe we are going to be. Alright, fine. So, yeah, I would have preferred not to do that, but, we survived it. Be ready with your grenades is the answer to this situation. And also, what you really want to be doing in the vehicle is always be moving. Moving targets are much harder to hit. So if we look at what we have going on over here, this really looks clear. This is good. This is a good area to operate in for our vehicle. There's some trees up here, but for the most part. There's more trees back here, but also rocks, which are much more worrisome. Again, hitting those is death. So I'm going to avoid that, stay in the front. If you can find an area that's really clear all the way around, they're not that common, but if you do hit those situations, then you can just do the NASCAR thing and continually circle around it in a closer and closer area and wipe them out. And that really works well. We're going to try a couple different techniques here. First, we're just going to try to keep moving and run by and constantly strafe. We're constantly shooting. We got run into a little bit there. How far you want to be zoomed out is really, it's a touchy thing. You want to be in close enough so you can see what's going on, but you don't want to be in so close that you can't see the bigger picture or turn with the terrain. But this is going to take a really long time, as you can probably tell. We're going to add grenades to it. And the key to all these fights is just end them as quickly as possible again. Firepower. The less time that those spawners are up, the less enemies they spawn to do damage to us and for us to have to kill. And it's really touchy with the grenades, because I can't get so close that I start running into their buildings, or I'm going to be in trouble. So, at the same time, I want to be close enough to hit them. But you can see we're definitely making some good progress here. Coming a little bit closer. There we go. And we're about down to half health. We're going to have to watch that. But I think we've got this. We've got a lot of them wiped out. Now we'll just take a path down the end. There's still more worms, though. As long as there's a few more worms left alive, I'm not super comfortable. That was a good pass. But again, maximum firepower, end the fight quickly. That's our goal. There we go. We will stop. And we will repair. And we have achieved victory. So we are now really secure in terms of our situation. Let's check our evolution level. Well, look at that. That's about as even as you're ever going to see it. Our spawner kills are actually up for the moment. They won't stay there. To the #1 spot. Pollution has exceeded time. And 16 to 17%. So we're not too far away from that 20% mark when we start seeing higher enemies. On the other hand, we have now officially cleared the entirety of the pollution cloud, except for possibly this area up here, if something had moved in there recently, from enemies. And we're putting up radars here to ensure that's not a situation. This one's probably close enough to take it out. That's probably all the other fighting really that I need to do for the time being, which means it's time to move on to the next phase. I can take down all of these turrets. I can absorb their ammunition, all of that, a few of these extra ones here. Our next phase is going to be planning for where are we going to build our final factory and what's our process going to be for that. I would say the rest of the game really starts in the next episode when we begin to look at some of those concepts. Thanks for watching. Factorio Demystified will continue coming up.